and welcome to the In the Trenches podcast. I'm your host, Lenny Tiller, along with our other co-host, Ernest Snooks, and we are pleased to welcome back our favorite guest, Mr. Renaud Brossard. How are you tonight, sir?
Pretty good. I'm touched that I'm one of your favorite guests already.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna. Am I gonna have to start putting a kind of hold in my calendar every couple of weeks? I'd love to do it, to be fair, but
I think so. Ernest, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I mean, I suffered through the weekend because of the great internet downage of Sunday, but here I am. Gave me some time to look over the health accord again a little bit and keep reading that little line about how we need UBI, which is somehow going to solve all of our problems, just like CERB did. Not really. But I mean, Renaud, we're very glad to have you back. I mean, it's always great chatting with you. And really thank you for coming back. We were supposed to continue the health accord, but then the UBI thing came up and the price of gas just flew up. And we said, who better to talk to than you?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you told me the last time we were chatting that we'd see $2 gas in this country in the next couple of weeks, I mean, I would have thought you were crazy. And then, I mean, we all saw what it was, right? Like the last time you did a fill up was probably a whole lot more expensive than what you're used to.
$20 in gas now is not that much for me. Well, actually, even $50. Like I filled up before it shot up.
Yeah,
I filled up my tank. I had half a tank. And so I put about 28 liters into it, and it still cost me about $70. Like it was like I'm actually scared to let it go all the way down to empty and try to fill up.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, right? It seems less painful if you see a $4 bill, even though it's for just 2 liters, than if you have to wait until it's empty and get one of those brown Canadian bills that we don't see that often, right?
And one of those bills now are worth less and less every day now, thanks to the crazy cost of living increases that we're seeing. We are seeing a lot of inflation, and fuel prices are only going to drive that up. I mean, even where I work, like I think I said this on the last episode, like we have some brake fluid, and usually this liter of brake fluid was like $11. Now it's like almost 20, and it's
my God.
Probably. I know it sucks. So I mean, like we got to pass it on to the customers. The customers, I mean, a lot of the people around here, they like trucks. Not the best thing to have in this kind of economy.
Well, with these gas prices, definitely not, but it's understandable, right? You live in Stephenville. It's not exactly a very, very large city where you have like urban transit and subway systems everywhere. The fact is, a truck is probably more adapted to that than in a big city. But the fact is, even people driving like really, really small cars are being hard hit by this. I was looking this up actually. So do you know what the price of gas in Newfoundland was about a year ago?
I think it was about $1. I remember the good days.
Oh, that you're talking like 2020 when we went back to what, like a
Yeah,
little bit below
yeah,
$1.
You're right.
But I was looking at this, and April last year was $1.40. Now, let's say that you have a brand new Toyota Corolla, so nothing fancy, nothing that consumes a whole lot of gas, like one of those really small economical cars. Just cost the price of gas in a year at current prices versus what they were last year. It's going to cost you $700 extra. That's a lot. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't have like $700 lying around that I can just spend on something else whenever I want to. And if I were to have that, I'm not sure like higher gas prices exactly where I want to spend it.
No, it's the same. Like I've got a Jeep Compass, and I mean, for the size, it's only a 2.4 liter engine. It's not a gas guzzler by any means, but still, I mean, it's still going to cost me about $100 to fill up my tank now. And I mean, like if you're someone who's making like on low income or on like social assistance,
Yeah.
You're going to have to start kind of making decisions. And it's not just that, the heating oil has gone up too. So, I mean, Canada's cold. You know, we can't afford to have the price of heating oil and all that shooting up, especially when we have seniors. I mean, Newfoundland has an aging population. So that's a fixed income population more than anything.
I mean, that's a good point. It's Canada is cold. It's also sparsely populated. What this means is that by definition, we're gonna have higher energy costs. Not necessarily a higher cost for each unit of energy we use, but we're gonna need to spend a lot of energy because we need heating. Nobody wants to turn off their heater at -35 outside. We also need to drive further distances because it is sparsely populated. So we know that there's these costs. And of course, like the people that are getting affected by this, they are very much a middle class and below. I was actually looking, there's this really far left group, research group in Quebec called IRIS. These guys believe that pretty much everything that has higher taxes or more government is good. And just a couple of years ago, they wrote a report calling gas taxes excessively regressive. And that's actually true. If you're poor, there's a minimum amount that you kind of need to pay for transportation. You can't afford to live in a condo right next to downtown with where you can just walk to the office. If you want to have a home, you need to live a little bit further away where there's not necessarily good transit or there's not necessarily transit. You need to drive. Because of that, there's kind of a minimum amount that you need to spend on fuel. And these are people that are hardest hit by things like gas taxes. And look, I know I'm quoting a report from Quebec here, but it's very much the same in Newfoundland. And gas taxes are not exactly low in Newfoundland. So right now, so gas was $1.94, you were telling me, right?
Yes.
Well, at $1.94, what you're actually paying for is about $1.35 for gas and about 59 cents in taxes. So those taxes add up, they're expensive. And sure, the government is not responsible for all of the recent increase in prices, but they're one of the major culprits for why gas is so expensive.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, that's very common for government, though. Government is usually the reason why plenty of things are expensive. I mean, everything comes with, that lovely little tax on it for this, for that. I'm really surprised they haven't taxed vegetables yet, but give that some time, they'll figure it away.
Don't give them the idea. But see, the thing is, with most products, you pay one or two taxes, right? You pay GST. Well, actually, in Newfoundland, you pay HST. You pay the provincial part of HST, you pay the federal part of HST. There it is, that's it. That's all you have to pay for. It does add on to the price, but that's just one tax. The thing is, when it comes to gasoline, you're paying a lot more than that, right? Because first, you start with federal excise. So that's 10 cents. Even if the price of gas was 20 cents, you'd be paying 10 cents in federal excise. Then you've got the Newfoundland gas tax. That's another 14.5 cents. Then you add a carbon tax on top of it, which, unlike what Andrew Fury says, yes, he's partly responsible for it. That's another 8.8 cents. So then you add all of those taxes, and on price with all those taxes, you add your HST, so your federal part, your provincial part, and that's how you get to, 58.6 cents of taxes on the current price of gas. So that is a lot. And of course, the government is getting richer because whenever the price of gas goes up, the revenues from HST, which is calculated as a percentage, go up. So governments are getting richer off of this. And there's definitely something that they could do to help everyday Newfoundlanders and Labradorians afford these higher bills. And they're not going to be able to reduce the price of gas to exactly what it was a year ago. But at this point, even a 5 or 10 cent drop would be welcome, I guess.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'll say this though, Lenny, you must be glad you don't have that truck anymore.
Oh my God, am I ever a 5.7 liter Hemi? Like,
I know.
I traded that thing in for a hybrid back in June, not because I wanted to, just because I worked so far out of town and it was a gas guzzler. Then I'd be, I don't know what I would do. I don't know how I would get to work every day.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between
with your thumb up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's the difference between what, a $250 fill up versus a $70 fill up. Like that's a huge difference. But the thing is, like, and you got to do it, and that's incredible. But a lot of people are not in that same situation, right?
No,
It's
exactly.
not everybody that has a bunch of money lying around their bank account to buy a new car. For a lot of people, either they just recently bought a car, so they can't really afford to change it for another one,
Right.
or that they need to have something used. And because of that, it's much harder for them to find something. And those are the hardest hit people by gas taxes.
No, it's true. And I mean, it's really sad to see the desperation that I think is going to come. Like, trust me, there's already people making jokes around. Like when I'm going meeting customers and clients and that, it's, there's always a joke with Mel. Soon you better gonna have to kind of keep an eye on your catalytic converters. You're gonna have to keep an eye on that hole in your gas tank and that, because everyone's going to be siphoning fuel and stealing catalytic converters and stuff. And I tell you this, I've heard a few people have siphoned gas around here. Not too many. I've heard like one or two cases where gas has already been siphoned. There's even one guy near me had a whole year's worth of wood stolen. Somebody just came and just took the wood and gone. And
Wow.
it's pretty bad actually. It's like a couple $1,000s worth of wood. So you're going to see this desperation, and it's only going to cause a lot more problems. But
Yeah.
the other thing too is that watch with this budget, and I mean you're gonna love the upcoming Newfoundland budget, because I can guarantee you this:
Yeah.
when they do it, they're gonna need to do something to kind of make up for this big punch in the ghoulies that they've been giving us with the gas tax. So you're gonna see Fury going, you get a rebate and you get a rebate and this guy gets a tax credit. Everyone's getting some kind of fuel rebate.
Yeah, and that's what most premier, well, that's what a lot of premiers have been talking about, right? They're saying what we're going to do is we're going to get sent some checks. Now, I don't know about you. I feel like that's extremely inefficient, because what this means is that you're first going to take the money out of people's pockets, then shuffle it around some government departments, then finally have it put on a check and then mailed back to you.
Yes.
It'd be so much easier if the money stayed in your pocket first, right? And to be fair, that's what a couple of politicians have understood. In Alberta, Jason Kenney announced that as of April 1st, the provincial gas tax, that's 13 cents a liter, is going to be suspended. It's going to be suspended until oil goes back down below $80 a barrel. Just for reference now, it's at about $100 US. And the logic behind that is quite sound. Is the fact that Alberta being an oil producing province, much like Newfoundland, it gets a whole lot more revenue whenever the price of oil is up. So according to the latest government's estimates in Alberta, every time the price of a barrel of oil is $1 US above their projections for $70 US, over a year, that's 500 million extra in revenue that they have. So if you want to replace a gas tax, well, you can do that pretty fast, to be honest, with this kind of revenue. And it's the same with, yep.
It was funny because the Newfoundland government was called on to do something very similar, and they said, no, nothing can be done. We don't have that authority. And about 2 days later, Jason Kenney's like, watch what I can do.
Yeah, and look, like, to be fair with the government, when they say they're not responsible for the recent increase in prices, it's true. They have a part to play in it. We're not the ones responsible. But when they try and say that they're not responsible for the majority, or at least not for the majority, but for a decent part of what is a very, very high price of fuel, that's absolutely false. Like, once again, it's you're paying 30% of the price of gasoline as taxes, and most of that is not going to Ottawa, is going to St. John's. That's what the provincial government's collecting. Actually, right now, on a $1.94 price per liter, on a $1.94, there's about 40 cents that's going to the province. So of course the province has some margin to do something about it. It could reduce the gas tax, which is 14.5 cents. It could do some HST rebates. BC did that at some point when they tried the HST. It could also simply cancel the carbon tax, let the feds impose one, which, to be fair, might take a little bit longer and might give a little bit of a break to drivers in Newfoundland and Labrador. So there's all of these solutions. So when Andrew Furey says he cannot do anything about it, that's absolutely false.
Well, CBC proved that too. I mean, I think it was Peter Cowan.
Peter Cowan.
Just like,
well, yeah.
He did amazing with that, and that was a master stroke, because he's just like, Furey's like, well, there's nothing we can do. It's not us. Well, here's this large diagram that states where all these texts are coming from. And so what do you have to say about that, Premier? Siobhan, where are you too? Siobhan, I need you. But I mean, he was like a deer in the headlights with it. And like the other thing too is that, like, the Newfoundland government has actually, their prediction for a barrel of oil, the price on the barrel of oil is even lower than Alberta's. I think it's $65 a barrel. So they're making bank. They're doing very, very well. This is going, you're going to see this budget, and it's going to look amazing. You know, they're going to be like, look at all the revenue is up, things are better, everything's great. Spend, and then you're going to see them kind of realize, whoops, we've kind of done the same thing that the Tories did when they were in charge up until 2015. Where, you know, we became a half province. Suddenly the money was flying, and then, but before we realized it, the debt had ballooned and the deficit had gone up, and everything was just crazy.
Well, that actually reminds me of a bumper sticker we had for some of our supporters in Alberta. And it said, "Dear God, please give us another oil boom. We swear we're not going to squander it away this time." and I feel like you're probably right. I feel like that's probably the mood right now at Confederation Building, where they're just like, yeah, you know, when we get those revenues, everything looks better, so we can start spending again, despite the fact that you still have this enormous debt behind that needs to be paid down a bit, that needs to reduce to a more, well, ideally reduced down to zero, but at the very least down to a more manageable level. And unfortunately, I think I do share your concern here that you're going to see a lot of new spending, a lot of new expensive programs. And these are not programs that are 1 year and then they're done the next one. These are programs that are getting renewed and keep getting more expensive, sadly. And honestly, even for the gas tax, like, let's say that tomorrow morning, the government wanted to abolish its provincial gas tax. That'd be a 14.5 cents per liter drop in the price right away. Do you know how much it would lose out in revenue?
How much?
About 170 million. It's not nothing. Like, I don't want to say it's nothing, but a $9 billion budget is something that can be managed, especially when you have higher revenue coming in from the different oil and gas plays in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Like, it really, and it really bothers me, actually, like, you know, when there is money to be made from oil and gas, not just through like the direct, you know, taxation from the platforms and that, but from the people it hires and that. So we've got the Bay du Nord decision that's being made behind closed cabinet doors. And I mean, usually we don't talk about the federal aspect of things here, but this does concern the province. And you know, I'm really shocked that the cabinet is so quiet about it. Like, I don't know if you saw what Minister O'Regan was saying. He said, like, I don't talk about this decision unless it's behind cabinet doors. And I couldn't believe that. You know, like, if we want to bring down fuel prices, there needs to be more production. You know, that's Absolutely. How you bring it down. And Bay du Nord, while it won't come online this year, it's still going to be there in the future. So it'll help, you know, meet the demand for oil, and it'll also, you know, create jobs. It'll create the revenue in that. But unfortunately, we're being held hostage by an environmental minister, a federal environmental minister with less than sensible kind of opinions on the matter.
Yeah, to be honest, I kind of liked Mr. O'Regan's stance on this, because I think it reveals a lot about what's going on behind closed cabinet doors. And understandably, the minister needs to have solidarity with the rest of the cabinet and try to show a united front. But what this quote is saying to me is that he has a different stance than most other folks in cabinet. Given what we've seen from this federal cabinet, I would assume that Minister O'Regan's a lot more pro-resource development than a lot of the other ones based on that statement. So unfortunately, that statement doesn't bode well for Newfoundland and Labrador, but I do want to commend O'Regan for, in a very tactful way, kind of showing that he did not necessarily agree with his cabinet colleagues. Like that is something I need to commend from him. But yeah, to your point about Beijing war, it would not reduce the price of gas tomorrow. And anybody thinking it would do that. I mean, that's flat out wrong. You're not able, it's not because you approve a project that the next day it's online and running. But to your point, it would help in the future. We know that we're still going to need oil and gas for the foreseeable future. I know there's people that want us to transition a whole lot faster than what we're doing. But most, or well, actually not even most, all credible sources point to the fact that we're still going to need oil and gas for the foreseeable future. So that is a lot of money that the government could do. It's not a lot of it's not money that the government would have to invest. It's also employment that would bring back more jobs to the province. And well, I think you said this in your last podcast, but as a wise man once said, the best social program is a job. I also think the best immigration program is a job, because usually that's why people come. People don't come for social programs. They come for the fact that they can earn a meaningful, that they can lead a fulfilling life and earn a living in some place. That is definitely something that would help. I'm still anxious to see what the federal government's decision is going to be, because we've seen this federal government be very centralizing and very Ottawa-centric, which does not bode well for provinces that depend more on resource revenue, unfortunately. But I think it's going to be interesting to see. And once again, for that quote from Minister O'Regan, I think it's great that he's kind of hinting that he doesn't support, or he doesn't think the same way the rest of his colleagues do.
Well, I'm really hoping that is the case, because people in St. John's, I know, and I know a lot of the oil workers and that, they weren't really happy with it. But I mean, like, now that you put it like that, I can understand. But I mean, it's for me at least, it's less dealing with. I mean, it's less of an opinion. Like, I don't really mind what the cabinet thinks. I mean, I'm not there to be Ottawa's representative to St. John's East or wherever it is that Seamus O'Regan is mentor. I'm there to be St. John's East representative to Ottawa. And the cabinet, it does not, they shouldn't have a role in that. It's essentially, and honestly, this whole thing should be a provincial matter. It should only have a, look, it was supposed to be, actually.
It should. And on a lot of things, we should have less Ottawa and more St. John's, more Fredericton, more Halifax, more Charlottetown, more Quebec, more Edmonton, more Regina. I could go on naming provincial capitals. But yeah, we need a lot less Ottawa, and we need a lot more autonomy for provinces to do those kind of decisions when they're in their territories. Absolutely. And I do understand your point, and it's true. A minister is also an MP, a member of parliament. As such, he should try to represent his constituents better. But I can still respect when a minister tries to, in a way, both respect cabinet solidarity as a principle and still imply that he does not necessarily support what the rest of the cabinet think. Now, we don't know what he's saying behind closed doors. That's another story. And maybe he agrees with his cabinet colleagues behind closed doors. But at least this statement's giving me a little bit of hope from him. And, if we're still looking at a minority government in Ottawa, we're looking at a prime minister that I believe would like to hold on to power for a little while more. And that prime minister, especially in a minority government, can't really afford to lose support in a lot of ridings. So maybe that's going to have some kind of sway. Hopefully it's going to have some kind of sway. And hopefully that helps Newfoundland and Labrador get some more projects approved.
Definitely.
He's
sorry.
he's been on record now. Like when he went over to Europe, he's literally saying now we have Canadian oil and gas for you after 5.5 years of just literally trying to destroy it.
Yeah.
So now he's got his tail between his legs, going to Alberta. But we need it. We need it. Can you do this? We need to get pipelines. We need all this stuff. We have on-tap potential. Well, yeah, this on-tap potential is shut down for 5.5 years.
We do. I mean, we have massive oil and gas reserves in this country, like both petroleum and natural gas. Actually, natural resources in general, we're pretty lucky in terms of what we've got underground in this country. So there's a lot of stuff we could do. I think the crisis with Russia and Ukraine has definitely shown that we do need more Canadian oil and gas, to be fair, because we know it's going to be reliable. We know we control the regulations around it, so we know how environmentally it can be done. We know how ethical it is in terms of what the money is going to get used for. Like there's a lot of good things going for it. Hopefully we're going to see some sort of change in the discourse around oil and gas development. I don't think it's necessarily going to get enthusiastic, but it might get a little bit more grounded in between what we should hope to do in terms of mitigating climate change, but also what we can realistically do in terms of curbing more, less ethical sources or less environmentally friendly sources to get energy resources in the world.
Definitely. And speaking about, you mentioned earlier social programs, and that kind of goes into the next delightful topic, which is, of course, universal basic income, the cure-all for what ails us. I'm just joking. I'm joking. I saw your face there.
Yeah, no, it's when someone tells you like, here's a miracle cure, it'll do everything. You should probably have a little bit of doubt with regards to that cure.
Yes, and I mean, like, I remember like when UBI kind of first really mainstream kind of was really talked about, and that was kind of when Andrew Yang was presidential candidate in the United States, and that's when people started really talking about it. That's when it started flowing around. And it sounded so nice. We get some free money. It's gonna help us pay this bill, and it's gonna make life easier. It's gonna give us an affordable a living. And then CERB came, and that was wonderful. We all thought that was great. We could stay home and we would get money, and we would and we didn't realize we were getting taxed on that money, but we were getting that money. And everyone said, it's going to spur economic growth, or at least just help spur the recovery, keep things going. And to an extent it did. But at the same time, a lot of people just took that money, shoved it in their pockets, and did not spend it.
Yeah. Well, I think CERB might have been the appropriate response in March 2020. Because you had I remember reading like that 1 week, 1 million Canadians were losing their jobs. Yeah. You've got about 36 million people in the country. 1 million people losing their jobs in 1 week is a lot. And understandably, you're going to need some sort of program, and you're going to need something that's going to be accessed fast. And that's what CERB did. Problem is, it took us a little bit too long before we tried to make it more targeted and switch people back into our existing programs like EI that are income tested, that are more adapted to people's needs in a way, but also more affordable from a taxpayer's perspective. But and this is the thing with UBI. Like everyone pitches this as you're going to get free money. Most serious advocates for UBI are going to pitch it as a way to make social programs work better. So what I mean by this is we're going to take our existing spending on social program, we're going to scrap it, and we'll take that money, maybe put in some more, but we'll take that money, and then we'll send that money in checks to various people. That's what the most serious advocates for UBI are going to say. And we did have some talk about UBI in this country for at least the last decade. There's been some stuff in 2016 during the election. The NDP was talking about it a bit. So it wasn't just Andrew Yang, but the fact is, when you look at it, it's true that our social programs, our targeted social programs, have a high administrative cost. But if you take that high administrative cost and you divide it by about what, 36, 38 million Canadians, you're not getting a lot of money. So there's, the last time we talked about this a bit, I was referring to UBC economist Kevin Milligan. Now, this is not like some hard right-winger. Kevin Milligan costed the Liberals' platform for the 2015 election. So not like a hard right-winger who hates social programs and everything. And what he looked at back in 2016 is, if we took all of the federal government's social spending and we turned it into universal basic income, how much could we send to people, right? So the federal government in 2016 was spending about 165 billion in various transfers to people. What I mean by transfers to people, sure, there's some target programs, but it's also stuff like old age security, the guaranteed income supplement, CPP, EI, like those are the big ticket items. And the total for those ones were about 165 billion a year. That works out to a little bit less than $400 a month per Canadian. So sure, I don't get any of those transfers. I'd love getting that $400 a month. But for people that actually depend on those transfers, $400 a month is nothing. $400 a month compared to even unemployment benefits is not that much money. So it would leave a whole lot of people worse off. And that's one of the problems with UBI. It's just you're taking something and it's true, you're eliminating a lot of the administrative costs. It's easier to send a check to everybody than to have to make some background checks to check if people are actually eligible for it. But you have the pot of money that's being sent means that it's only a very small amount per person.
That's true. And and that's the thing though, people don't really consider, you know, these things. And I mean, kind of like when you said, like when they don't do enough background checks on serve, and that's very, very true. And that was the danger. That was my biggest problem with it, is that they rushed it out. And it's the same thing with the other support they had for businesses. When they started giving them out to like a lot of the top Canadian companies were getting this and then using it to pay dividends. It was like $5 billion. $5 billion of our money is going towards like these companies, and then the Chinese state-run companies were getting it. So that was a whole other issue that
And once again, like maybe CERB was the right response in March 2020, but it shouldn't have taken us 8 months until we changed it for something else. Like no, it should have been the thing that we do in March 2020 while we're working on another solution to implement in like, let's say even May or June of 2020. That would have saved taxpayers a whole lot of cash and would have been more targeted, more adapted, and would have better fitted everybody's needs depending on their income and their the standard of living they had before getting those government checks. But so to go back to UBI, like that's the thing. So first off, if you just want to send money to everybody, if you take the existing spending, you're not going to be able to send a lot. Some other folks are going to say, you know, take the existing spending, but add a little bit to it, make it more interesting, right? So one proposal was floated back in 2016 was to send $1,500 a month to every Canadian. That sounds pretty good. I don't know about you, but if I had 15 extra $100 every month in my bank account, I'd be pretty happy.
Yeah.
Problem is, to do that, you need about 600 billion. At the time, the federal government was making 140 billion in income taxes. So to get that $1,500 a month, you'd basically have to quadruple everybody's income taxes at federal level. So, and that's the second problem, right? If you're either A, your benefits are going to be pretty low, or B, if you want to have a benefit that's interesting enough that you're not necessarily making people poor, then it's going to be excessively expensive. Like 600 billion, that's what we spent in 2020 with CERB and with everything else. That's what we spent at the federal level. A usual budget before the pandemic was about 300 to 350 billion. We're now closer to 400 now. But we're still a far cry from the 600 it would take for that one specific program.
No. It's like, and like, we don't even think about the other aspects of that too. Like with that money, you know, things are going to change. Prices are going to go up because, I mean, companies and businesses, if I'm a business and I know that people are getting an extra, say, $1,500 a month, I can raise my prices, and because people are going to pay.
Oh, absolutely. It's not, look, the fact that people have more money in their pockets doesn't mean there's more goods available to sell. And ultimately, it's a matter of supply and demand. If you've got more money, you're going to be willing to pay a little bit more. Like, that's understandable. And that's part of why, like, when I want to say it's Friedman that said inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. And it's very true. Right now, what we're seeing with the cost of living, part of it is inflation. Another part of it is supply chain issues. Nobody's exactly sure which part of it is which. But yeah, inflation usually is a monetary phenomenon. It's because you have more money in circulation, and maybe you have more goods and services, but not to the same level as you have more money in circulation. So prices go up.
Definitely.
And well, to go back to UBI, then you've got the third scenario where you want to send something interesting enough in terms of sum. So you send that $1,500 a month, but you try to keep it affordable. So you have a type of phase out. So every time you make a little bit of money, well, part of your benefits get clawed back, and that's how you keep it affordable. So to give those $1,500 a month, you'd have to use a phase out of about 75%. So what this means is that for every dollar you're making on your own, you'd have 75 cents less in benefit. At some point, and that's the other problem with UBI, is that if you have this kind of clawback, if you want to keep a large enough benefit that people are not necessarily going to be poor, if you want to keep it affordable, then you're going to have a disincentive to work. Say that you're getting a job say that you don't have any job at all and you're getting this $1,500 a month. That's $18,000 a year. That gets sent in your bank account every year. Now suddenly you find a job and you get paid $20 an hour, which, you know, isn't bad. Well, for every hour you work, sure, you get $20 in your account, but you get $15 taken out of what you get. So it's kind of like working for $5 an hour. That does not become attractive. There's not a lot of people I know that would be looking at employment saying, you know, I want to get that $5 an hour. And that's the problem with UBI. That's why it's always presented as this kind of like cure-all solution, to use your words, but it can only be two of three things. It can either be affordable, it can have a significant enough benefit, or it can have some more motivation to get people back to work. It can only have two of those three things. And so far, there's not a lot of combinations that actually are attractive in terms of switching from our social programs to UBI.
Anything you want to say on it, Lennon?
No, I'd never explained it that good in my life. So,
well, me neither, to be honest. This is a first.
It's UBI is one of those things, like you were saying, CERB was needed at the time, but they used it as an excuse.
Yeah.
And a debate point for universal basic income. But we did see that when things started to get better, CERB stayed and jobs came back and couldn't be filled.
Yeah.
So does the same thing happen with universal basic income? Now, I do believe as jobs become automated and things, and there's less need for people in the workforce, well then yes, there's something needs to be done. But I don't know what the right answer is, and I'm still a big proponent of this. And I think I said this the last time. If you can't work, like if there's a reason you can't work, yes, You deserve a living income that you can be comfortable. But I think if you can, you use the basic tax credit. Instead of having the basic tax amount at 9 or 10,000, you set it at whatever your UBI is for those who cannot work for whatever reason.
Yep.
And the first $25,000 to $30,000 you make is non-taxable.
And to be fair, that's what you're saying is exactly why we have a social safety net.
Right.
Is to ensure that those who are not in the position to, those who cannot earn income for whatever reason can still lead a decently comfortable life. Not a life of luxury, but a decently comfortable life. But replacing all of that with UBI would either leave a lot of people worse off, or lead to some significant disadvantage to work, or be very expensive. I gotta say though, I'm a little bit more optimistic than you are. I don't really see a scenario where jobs get replaced and there's no new jobs.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Fact is, and call me an optimist all you want. I've very rarely been called an optimist, but this is one of those times, I guess. But one of the things that we found is that every single time a certain category of job has been wound down, we've had new jobs pop up that are more productive, that bring more income, that bring more money, and that make people richer. The same thing actually happened back when street lamps became automated. There's a lot of people who used to go from street lamp to light them up every single night, and those people were paid to do it. Nowadays, it's not something we need. There's a lot of different jobs like that have changed, that have become automated, that have become, for which you don't necessarily need labor anymore. But now, instead, we build computers, we build software, we have people working in the oil patch in much more productive job than you would have had in the oil patch in 1936. There's a lot of it comes from the fact that as we've found those ways to automate some jobs, we've been able to create new jobs that are more productive. And yeah, there's part of it that's going to be retraining. It doesn't mean it's the same person that was, I don't know, let's take an example, a taxi driver that can become a software engineer tomorrow morning. And there's some retraining maybe. But I'm still very optimistic that we're always going to have, or at least that in my living, we're always going to have enough jobs, I guess. Well, unless government fucks it up massively, but that's
right.
That's a story.
Well, hey, listen, let's not give them any ideas here. Like generally government is not, like they generally do that, that's kind of that's their shtick, as it were. They're like, oh look, this is working very well, let's take this wrench and put it here. Boom. Oh crap. Okay. But no, and I agree with you. Actually, I'm optimistic too, because humans are a very adaptable kind of species. We when one thing happens, we adapt to make those changes. And that's why you don't hear all these kind of street light lighters. They're not their families aren't there oh dear, ever since my grandfather was let go from his productive and high paying job, turning on that lamp, my family has struggled in poverty. It was he's out of the job and he had to find something, and 9 chances out of 10 he said, okay, I'm going to go into another industry or maybe something with a similar skill set, and it happens, it changes. And the thing about it is that, we can use that. That's the beauty about people. They can change, they can adapt. And that's why I'm against this kind of blanket UBI idea, because for me, it's all about getting people who can work, not those who are unable to, but those who can physically work.
Yep.
Hop off the sofa, off the porch, off wherever they're hanging out to, and into a job. And that's the best kind of way of living, instead of just waiting for the government, to send down the check like manna from heaven. It's that, but I mean, like, but the government loves things like UBI because it's optics. It says,
Yeah.
we are, and that's one thing I love about politics. I love looking at these things and saying, like, how are they going to use this from an optics standpoint? And they'll say, we're here to help the people in need. We're here to help the struggling and the less fortunate. And then the people who are currently not struggling and less fortunate kind of get a tax bill in the mail, and they're like, why did my taxes go up this high? Oh crap,
Yeah, and to your point earlier about the budget, like we're probably going to see the government send out some checks to people, because when the government sends out a check, it seems like it's a hero. It seems like it's actually doing something, even though what it's doing is just taking a bunch of money from your wallet and then sending it back to you on a different piece of paper after having it go through a different bunch of bureaucrats. Like, it's not exactly productive, but it makes the government seem like it's doing something. Whereas if the government reduces the gas, but if it reduces the gas tax tomorrow, you won't see a line item on your receipt saying gas tax that was removed by X premier saving you X dollars per fill up. You won't see that. Whereas the checks are much more popular for politicians in that way. But let's be honest, for the public, like, once again, what is going to give you the best kind of bang for your buck, but also the most direct kind of relief? Is it getting a check after it's been taken out of your paycheck before, or taken at the pump? Or is it reducing the price at the pump by simply taking less out of your pockets? Reducing the price at the pump wins every time.
Like, and that's the thing that annoys me about the optics, because I mean, that's just as good optics. It's not as sexy, I guess, as saying, like, me and like 8 of these bureaucrats gathered in a room and we stayed there all night eating like Little Caesars and like Chinese food, and then we figured out we need we need this one program. It's the only way we can fix things. But that's government. Government has a really weird way of approaching things. They like to do things the hard way, and it's frustrating, because even when they gave out I'll kind of give you like another example here, like for the what was it there, what is the word I'm looking for, the necessary workers, when everyone was working. So the Canadian government, or at least I think it was Canadian government, gave out like I think it was like $1,500, and everyone was like, oh, that's great. This is going to help these people, give us a nice reward. And now the motivation behind it was that people were going to get this money. They were going to go do a bit of spending on a couple of things and kind of put it back into the economy. I did not do this. I did what most sensible people would have. I looked at that check. I said, this is a very beautiful check. I love the paper. I love the quality. It's very nice. I'm going to hold it close to my chest. And then I'm going to go put it in my bank account, and I'm going to sit on it. I'm not going to spend this money because I don't need a new TV. I don't have any rent. I don't have to need this to pay my rent. I'm still working. I don't really need anything done with my Jeep. I'm just going to put it in the bank account, and then when vacation time comes, I'm going to take that money and I'm going to spend it somewhere that, unfortunately, because of the cost of things in Canada, is probably not Canada. I hate to say that, but I mean,
but honestly, and that's one of the things we saw, like with the early supports for the pandemic. I don't remember the exact statistic, so don't quote me on the exact number.
No, no problem.
But I just want to make it clear for anyone listening, like, please look up what the exact number is, because I do not remember it by heart. But there were some reports that for every single dollar that was lost in revenue during the pandemic, the Fed spent a bunch more. I believe it was either $7 for every bucks in lost revenue, or $20 for every bucks in lost revenue. But either way, the fact is, it was very inefficient. It sent a lot more money. So there's actually a lot of people that just got richer off of the fact that they got some government support. And of course, what did people do? Well, they couldn't spend it on a vacation, So that money went in the savings account, or they can spend it on a variety of different things. What did they spend it on? Spend it on home renovations. That's when we saw the massive increase in the cost of lumber. They spend it on new houses. That's also when we saw the massive increase in the cost of new homes. They spent it on a bunch of things that were spent locally. We also had a car shortage for a little while, if you remember. So we've had all of these things, and yeah, people spend the money differently. People also saved a whole lot of money. From the government's perspective, when the goal was to stimulate spending, actually stimulated saving a little bit more.
Which is not kind of good in that kind of situation, because you need money to circulate, you need things to be bought, you need it to flow.
I mean, I kind of disagree there. I think it's neither good nor bad. I just think it's not the government's job to dictate whether or not you should be spending or saving money.
Fair enough,
but
fair enough.
if you want to judge a government program that's aimed at getting people to spend money, but instead motivate people to save money, then yeah, the government program is a failure in the sense that it did not achieve its objectives.
That's true too. Now, one thing I remember, there was an experiment with UBI in Canada very recently,
Yep.
and that was in Ontario. And I don't think it was very successful, actually, because the PC government, as soon as they got in, they took a look at it and were like, no.
Well, for a lot of these experiments, the people that got the free money are very happy with it. But a result of the experiments are often, and if I remember well, the reason why the Ford government canceled it is that it was getting very expensive, and it was proving to be something that was not necessarily motivating people to get back to work. It was not something that was affordable. So they wanted to replace it with something else. And once again, this is UBI done on top of all the existing social programs. So this is basically, that's $165 billion bill that you need to add at the end of the day, right? And I know there's a lot of people that think we can get that money from the rich, we can get that money from the wealthy. If we were to take every single dollar, not 1% of what they have every, no, I mean, if we were to tomorrow morning get every single dollar that families with over 20 million in assets have, that includes a lot of farmers, by the way. If we were to take every single dollars of what they have, we'd have 560 billion. That's a lot of money. That would also pay for a $1,500 a month UBI for everyone for 11 months. Then what do? You don't have that money anymore. So after those 11 months, it's not 11 months next year as well. It's 11 months once and done. You're not getting that money. That's assuming that money doesn't move, or that those people don't move out. That's assuming there's no loss in income tax revenue, which there definitely will be. The fact is, those programs are simply not affordable. And if you want to get money from the wealthy to do it, believe it all you want, but it's not going to be more affordable. It's not going to compensate for it. If we do have those programs, it is most likely a very large middle class tax increase that's going to pay for it.
No, that's very, very true. And it almost, like the way you kind of said that, reminded me of Margaret Thatcher. What was it there? Like, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. And and actually, like you're right, because with UBI, and with like people saying, if we tax the richer Canadians and we can fund this, like, that's the thing, like, that's why people are rich. And when you're rich, you have the ability to move. You have mobility for the most part, of course. But I mean, and that's what happened, in Venezuela. That's what happened in Argentina. That's what happens in a lot of other countries, where they start kind of implementing this very expansive social programs.
I mean, you're absolutely right. France, actually, the very capitalist neoliberal country of France, obviously, actually had a wealth tax, and they canceled it. That's because after they looked at it, in the decade between 2000 and 2010, 14,000 millionaires left France. And look, I'm not saying let's have pity for those 14,000 people stuck with $1 million in assets. Like, yeah, they're rich, good for them. But what it meant is that France lost a lot of revenue because those are very high income earners that were paying their taxes in France and are no longer paying their taxes in France because they moved out. And it's the same thing that happens in a lot of countries actually that have had those wealth taxes. Actually, most European countries that had wealth taxes in the 90s do not have wealth taxes anymore because of that. Because they saw that the money that they were trying to get through wealth tax would lead to bigger losses in revenue from what they were getting from their high income earners to the regular tax code. It's exactly the same thing we could see in Canada. I know wealth tax was one of the things that the Green Report looked at. Unfortunately, it might have the exact same influence in Newfoundland and Labrador, where you're going to get a bit of revenue from it, but you're going to lose a lot more from the other taxes that are not going to be collected.
We really got to like go over the Green Report and get you in on that one, because that is, that's a fun thing to talk about, the recommendations in the Green Report.
It is, and I want to be clear, there's a lot of really good stuff in there. And I do want to commend Premier Fury for commissioning such a thing, because it's good to have this kind of third-party look from outside of government. And I do get that go at it from different spheres in society. Like you did have labor, well, until that one, I can't remember her name, but that one labor person left. Mary Shortall, there it is. Yeah, until she left, you did have labor to involve. You had business. You had very accomplished people from various walks of life looking at it. This is a very healthy exercise. That doesn't mean all the recommendations are going to be good, but there's a lot of good stuff. And the stuff with regards to cutting spending, I think they got the very vast majority of it right. With regards to the sale of assets, there's some very interesting proposals. I haven't looked into them as much, but there's some interesting proposals. But when it comes to levying more revenue, you can't really get more revenue out of a province that has a declining population. You're not going to attract more people by raising taxes. You're not going to attract new industries by raising their tax bills. Like that part is a little bit more dysfunctional. But at least on the expense side, there's a lot of good stuff.
Like there was things there, but that Moya Green came up with, like you said. I mean, they had merit, but like my biggest worry about Moya Green, is that, like, and I don't say this kind of rudely, she's a bit of a hatcheteer when she comes in to kind of cut things loose. I mean, it's like when they put her in charge of Royal Mail, and she did that. Like when she goes into a project or into something, what her answer is going to automatically be, and it's going to be privatization. Now, I like privatization. I think it's a wonderful thing, but it has to be done. It has to be done in a certain way.
Of course.
It's
not. It shouldn't be privatization for the sake of privatization. And I say that as a very large proponent of getting government out of business. But it should be done in a way that leads to the most revenue for the province, but also that leads to the best return for consumers of those services too. That part I absolutely get. But to defend Mark Green's approach on this, when you look at the financial situation of a province like Newfoundland and Labrador that has over $30,000 worth of debt per capita, and that's before you add all the unfunded liabilities from pensions and everything else, this is not really a situation where you can afford to where you can just cut a little bit of things at the edge and make it work. This is a situation where you need to have some drastic reforms, and part of it needs to involve asset sales, because asset sales, well, with stuff like Marble Mountain, you're probably just cutting a loss, to be honest, and transforming something that's a loss center from a taxpayer's perspective into a revenue generator, because it's going to be a private business that has to pay taxes. You also have the proceeds from the sale that can help pay the debt, that would reduce interest payments. And at a time when we're seeing interest payments go up, that's a good thing. But even with things like the Liquor Corporation, for instance, selling out the liquor corporation, and a lot of people are going to say that, yeah, it'll lead to a drop in provincial revenues, and that is true. Unless you massively hike beer and wine and spirits taxes, which, as a taxpayer advocate, not a big fan of doing that, but unless you do it, you're going to see a drop in revenue. But what you're also going to see is a couple of $100 million or a couple of billion in money that's going to be put into the provincial treasury that can be used to fill in new, to pay for spending instead of going into debt, basically. And that has an impact. That lowers the cost of that. That lowers this, $30,000 plus bill that every single Newfoundlander or Labradorian is born with.
That now that's true if we had a government that would take the revenues that they gain from this sale and use it responsibly. But unfortunately, the Newfoundland government, as we've stated several times in the past, I mean, both with you and just in general, we're not really the best financial stewards. I mean,
I just need to put one caveat there. I do think Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are the best financial stewards for Newfoundland and Labrador. I just don't think those in government are the best.
No. That's
I just want to put that caveat.
No. You're right, and that I agree with. I mean, our government, when it comes to spending, is like somebody referred to it as the Ralph Wiggum of.
I mean, drunken sailor came to mind, but let's go with Wiggum.
Well, Wiggum is too. You know, like he's well-meaning. He's like, I'm helping, and it's just destroying everything around him. And that's kind of the best way I somebody said it to me. I've been using a lot of Simpsons references lately. It's delightful. It was
always
yes, they do. I mean, but like that, we really should, talk about having a go over of the Green Report. That would be a fun conversation, and hair pulling for some people who would probably be listening, but it's all about inspiring conversation.
Come on, we can all afford a bit of hair pulling.
Yes. Well, I don't know. I'm starting to afford less and less lately. The joys of age. But no, like I really don't think that, like, especially those, they were floating UBI through the health accord. Like kind of quickly getting back as we kind of roll things down. They were touting UBI as an improvement for health outcomes and things like that. Because it gives people the living, like a living wage and all this kind of thing. And I don't see how, because I mean, like Newfoundland, like for us to get UBI for this province, we can't afford anything. Like literally, like if we rolled out UBI and it costed, like the cost was some crazy amount, Moody's is just going to look at us and be like, that's very nice. It's very nice you're rolling out this. Down goes your credit rating by a very large amount. Good luck.
It probably would, and that's the issue with those programs. It's not because you get a 1-year boost in oil revenue that you're always going to have that boost in oil revenue every year, right? Fortunately, it comes and goes, and now it comes, but we've seen the past couple of years that it can definitely go. But with regards to UBI, I think it would indeed jeopardize the province's ability not to care today, but to care tomorrow. And that's always where my angle, especially when I talk about that, is that we all want more social programs. But the problem is, if we're not able to pay for them today with the money we make today, we're shoveling that burden onto our kids, and we're jeopardizing their ability to pay for their own social programs. So we're taking a very short-term approach to have a lot more social programs than we can afford, and putting that burden on our kids that are going to have a lot less social programs, but still very high taxes. It's not exactly a winning combination. So that's part of it. But I'd say even in terms of health outcomes, look, if you give the government enough money, it can solve anything. The only thing is that it's not going to solve it efficiently. Sometimes it's not about shoveling more money. It's about doing things better, and it's about finding more different actors. And part of that solution, especially when it comes to improving health outcomes, part of that solution comes from decentralization, recognizing that the needs are not the same in every single, well, from the Ottawa perspective, that they're not the same in every single province, but from a provincial perspective, recognizing that they're not the same in every single region. That you can have different kinds of services available in different regions that are going to be more targeted with what people need. And like a very good example of that is you're probably going to have more hip replacement surgeries in Newfoundland or New Brunswick that have a much older population on average than you're going to have in Banff, Alberta. But you're probably going to get a lot more broken legs in Banff, Alberta than you're going to get in Newfoundland, Labrador, or in New Brunswick. And the same thing goes for regional disparities. It's not every single part of a province that has the same economy. If you go to places like Labrador, you might get a little bit more workman's compensation cases than if you go in a place like St. John's that's a lot more urban. So you need to recognize those regional disparities and offering different services, partnering with people locally, whether they're private or public sector, helps get those kind of services set up in the right way so that they can be given to a population so that they can meet the needs of the population, and often at a much lower cost. You know, and I mean, getting back to the whole, well, to health, of course, but to health in general, one of my favorite comparisons for Canada is Australia, because we're two resource-rich economies with people concentrated in a small area and then a sparse population in the rest of the country. I don't think there's any better comparison for that. And we're talking about decently large countries where there's decent distance involved as well. Australians also have a winter. There's some phenomenal skiing destinations down there, apparently. So I like making that kind of comparison. When we look at health, Australia spends about 4% less than we do. So let's just say they spend the same as we do. But the outcomes are better. Why? Because they have more capacity. They have more hospital beds. They have there's something that they do right in terms of treatment. It's not because they need to spend more money. It's not because they have a UBI. They don't. It's because they found ways to do stuff that's more regionalized, that's more adapted, and to employ both private sector and public sector innovation to make health outcomes better.
That's very true.
Yeah. At the end of the day, there is no, I don't know how to
yeah, there's no cure-all solution.
Right. And I don't know, sometimes it feels like we're in so deep that we can just drown. And we're just scraping and scraping and scraping. And I don't know what the answers are anymore. And I wish somebody did. And I guess there is no one right answer. It's about just trying to figure it out without crippling everything.
Yeah.
And I don't think UBI is the answer to that personally, unless someone can prove me wrong. I mean, I always say my mind is made up until I'm offered new information that changes it. Because I'm never so stuck on one thought. My mind can be changed. So, but from what I've seen so far, the concept of UBI sounds wonderful. The concept of a gas tax sounds wonderful on paper, but it doesn't have the same effect in reality as it does on paper.
I mean, I don't think a gas tax sounds wonderful, but yeah, go on.
But like, they put in a carbon tax so people drive less. Not taking into account Newfoundland is not Ontario. We just can't avail of public transportation whenever we want.
Yeah.
I have to drive a half hour every day to go to work. And now you've made it more expensive for me to have a job, which means I have less money to pay my bills and to enjoy things that I could be putting back into the economy because I have to pay a carbon tax. It's okay maybe in an urban center where you have options. In Newfoundland, you do not have options. You have to drive to get places.
I think you're absolutely right on this. And it does affect people in the urban centers. It just affects them differently.
Yes.
And look, I'm going to make a very personal example here. Me. I live 5-minute walks away from a subway station. I can walk to my grocery store. For me, the carbon tax doesn't affect me when it comes to my cost of transportation, but it affects me every time I go to the grocery store.
Right.
Because there's someone driving a truck from the farm to the place where I have to buy my food. And whenever the price of gas goes up, that gets reflected in my grocery bill. So even people in urban areas feel it. But you're absolutely right that they have more options, right? And that's what it is. But there's a very good paper from the Montreal Economic Institute that actually documents that. And he looked at the carbon tax, and he looked at who it affects, and he found out that, on average, people in urban centers pay less, and people in rural areas pay more. And it's understandable, it's logical, by the fact that distances are so great and that other options for transportation don't exist, or also would be inefficient. You probably wouldn't want to run a bus in Stephenville. It probably would be a lot less efficient than just having people take their personal car instead. So absolutely, it makes a difference. Even in terms of cost of living, the Bank of Canada actually came out with some good data today. According to the Bank of Canada's own calculation, if it wasn't for the carbon tax, inflation would have been 0.4 percentage point lower this year. It doesn't seem like much when you say 0.4 percentage points, but inflation was 5.1% in January. That would have been 4.7% instead. That makes a difference.
It does. It does. And
I agree.
And one thing I got to say, like kind of in closing, is that one thing I really love is when people offer kind of these alternatives for us rural folk. And it's usually like these very urban people. And one of the things I've been hearing about lately is trains. There are people who want to rebuild the Newfoundland Railway. Like they're serious about this. They want to rebuild. They want to make a functioning railway all around the province again. And now, does that hit the nostalgia button for me? Yes, it does. I love I love the idea of riding the rails, but put this thing together, to put the infrastructure back into place, it would bankrupt us again. Well, I mean, it would drive us even closer to bankruptcy than what we are, and we're already pretty broke.
I mean, look, if they want to do it with private sector money, they should. Like, if there's a business case for it, they absolutely should, and it'd be great. Like, and full disclosure, I like trains too. Like, yeah.
Same.
But if they want to do it with private sector money, it's good. But when it comes to putting government money, it's not necessarily going to be better. There needs to be a strong business case, and if there's a strong enough business case, you're going to find investors willing to do it, not out of the kindness of their heart, but because there's good money to be made.
Yeah, and that's why you don't have businesses chomping at the bit to kind of say, like, we're going to build a train across the province, and that, because there is no sense to it. It's the same thing with the fixed link that they want to put between Northern Peninsula and Labrador. Nobody wants to invest in this. No, there's no business that says, you know what, this is a wonderful idea that's going to make everything a lot better. Here's $1 billion. Let's get this started. Let's build a tunnel under the water. It just doesn't happen. And unfortunately, we only have to look even closer to home about things, in terms of supply and demand. There are airports in St. John's, or airports in Deer Lake, and they have a certain amount of supply and demand. And other airports and other facilities, they will suffer because of that, because it's all competition, and if one airport cannot compete, that airport is not going to work. I'm mostly saying Gander in this situation, of course. I'm talking about because Gander, where it's close enough to St. John's, I mean, they struggle. They're caught in between two major centers. I mean, the Deer Lake and the St. John's.
There's a bit of that. There's also the fact that historically it was a much more important airport. It was a necessary stopover for fuel. Now, thanks to, but also because of innovation, you don't necessarily need that stopover. And it does impact people. Like there's a lot of people that had a job in this industry that lost their jobs. But a lot of people did reinvent themselves and found something new to do.
And that's very, very true. And I mean, like I said, it comes down to the adaptability of people, and that's something that I wish was thought about more when we implement a lot of these expensive spending programs. But I mean, I guess it's getting kind of late, and we've covered a lot tonight. And Renaud, like it's always a pleasure having you on.
Likewise.
We really should talk about you being a bit more regular on here, because it's always a very dynamic conversation.
I would love that. You guys let me know when you need me to hop on, and I'll be happy to do it.
Awesome. Lenny.
I just want to thank you, Renaud. It's always a pleasure, as always. I've been fairly quiet tonight, but I've taken in a lot of what you've had to say and learned a lot for sure.
Well, I'm glad you weren't sleeping, at least.
Oh no, there's no time to sleep anymore. There's too many issues to find solutions to, so there's no time to sleep. But Renaud, do you have any final words before we kind of close out?
I mean, once again, gentlemen, it was a pleasure. And if you ever need me back to talk about some other issue, always feel free to reach out, because it is a pleasure doing this. And it is also one of the very few podcasts I listen to actively. So
awesome.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ernest, you got any closing words, my friend?
I have spoken a lot tonight, which is, I'm just really, I've had a really good conversation. I'm hoping that our listeners will take what we've said to heart and kind of help influence their opinions in the future, and maybe use that to kind of tell the government, maybe we don't need this, maybe we need something else, and then that's what I love about having these conversations. That's why I like having Renaud on here. I mean, he's the numbers guy, and he does a damn good job at it. And I mean, that's why it's so enjoyable, because you can help make better sense of the numbers than I would, or Lenny, and it's that little niche that you fill that we really need. So thank you, man, damn table. Thank you very much for coming on. I mean, it really is always a pleasure.
Well, I think my head's not going to fit through the door now. So
yeah. Yes, and I certainly echo that, and thank you for always agreeing to come on and giving us all the info we need, and not just us, but the people of this wonderful province. And on behalf of In the Trenches, folks, it's day one of no COVID restrictions. Still be mindful, it is out there, but it is nice at the same time. And remember, just be kind, because we're known to be a kind province that has not been always so kind during COVID. So let's turn that around and get kind again, and respect people's choices, their individual choices, respect their right to free speech and freedom, and just do you, Newfoundland and Labrador. Until we see you again next week, take care, everybody. Bye.
Take care.